So you're starting a new remote job. Congratulations on landing it. But spoiler, it's harder than it looks. While so many people were forced to transition to working from home during the pandemic, starting a new job remotely is a completely different ballgame because you don't yet know what the dynamics are, how people communicate, and you don't have those existing relationships. So after starting a new job remotely during the pandemic and also helping employees onboard onto remote roles, here are my 5 tips to make sure that you get the best out of the experience and also don't feel like you're completely lost, which is totally normal, at least at the start. Tip number 1 is to cut yourself a little slack. Accept that it's going to be uncomfortable in the first couple of months. You might feel that everyone else seems to know everything and you don't know anything yet. That's totally normal when starting any new job, but when you're working and you're more isolated from your colleagues, you don't necessarily have someone right next to you to ask a quick question, it can feel like you don't know everything that you need to know. So make sure that you're always communicating, asking a lot of questions that you need, but accept that it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for the first couple of months. Most people say it takes about 3 months to start feeling comfortable in that new role, so give yourself that leeway. Tip number 2, set up a proper dedicated workspace that's also ergonomics, so you make sure you're avoiding any repetitive strain injuries. In an office, that's all already taken care of for you, and you might think you can get away with working from bed for a little while. The reality is you're going to do damage to your body, you're not going to be showing up properly for work, so you want somewhere with no distractions that's properly set up where you can do your best work. I have a whole other video on how to set up a good workspace to help you avoid forward neck and slouching shoulders and all of that, so I'll link to that up above as well. Tip number 3, get to know your tech and tools and also have a backup. So one of my friends started a remote job and on his first day, his laptop still hadn't arrived. It actually took 2 weeks for his computer to arrive and to be able to start working, which is insane because he was abroad. But make sure that there is some kind of backup and you've discussed that with your manager. When are you going to receive your tools? If possible, try to get them a little bit earlier so that you can get acquainted as well. For example, I had to use a Mac for my new job and I wasn't that comfortable using a Mac. I'd never used one before. So I made sure to get it, I requested to get it a little bit earlier just to start getting used to it. And I have a video on that experience too. I was definitely pulling my hair out in the very beginning, but having just a couple of days to get used to it was incredibly valuable. That also applies for any other communication tools that you're going to be using. So if you're using Slack or Microsoft Teams or Zoom and you haven't used it before, then just having a few days to get to know those new tools so that you're not struggling on your first day will be really useful. Tip number 4, building relationships. A lot of people seem to think that it's not possible to build relationships if you haven't met that person in person. I beg to differ. In fact, I've got colleagues who I've never met and have a really great relationship with. I'm able to share things with them and I feel completely comfortable and I have complete trust. However, it is more difficult and you do actually have to put more effort in. So this tip comes in 3 different parts for how you can do that in your first coming days. The first is to send out a message to the company introducing yourself, telling them why you're excited to join the company, what you're going to be doing, what your role is, what exciting projects you're going to work on, and then also share a little bit of something about yourself. It might be that you discover that you have some really interesting common interests with someone else. So in my first week, I discovered that one of my colleagues has a YouTube channel. So we often meet up and talk about that. So whatever your hobbies are, put them out there and you'll see you'll be able to build connections quite quickly. I also recommend booking one-to-ones with the people in your immediate team, if that's not already done for you, and just getting to know them as people when you start to work together. Alternatively, for social time with your colleagues, you could always send a 10-second dance break. The second part is reminding people who you are, particularly from different teams, and not to be embarrassed about asking for reminders as well. It's completely acceptable that you won't be able to get to know everybody in the company unless they're really small in a very short space of time. So don't be afraid to ask for clarification. In fact, there was there was an article going around about these two guys who had joined at pretty much the same time and looked pretty similar, and people kept confusing them. So you want to make sure that's not you. So remind people, hi, you know, this is my name and this is the team I'm in and this is what I'm working on. It's always helpful. The third part is getting some social time in. So not all companies are great at doing this necessarily. So it's completely fine to just ask your colleagues to have a coffee break if that's the norm, or stay for a couple of drinks after work on a Friday, or just catch up during one of your lunch breaks and share that lunch break together. And definitely initiate some social interactions when you can also talk about things outside of work. I found, particularly with working remotely, it's difficult in meetings to have those kinds of interactions because people are quite focused on getting that meeting done and kind of getting offline. So if you carve out specific social time, that works a lot better. There is a really cool Slack integration called Donut that can help you to do that. So it randomly allocates people from different departments and gets a meeting booked in for them. So feel free to suggest that to your company if they don't have a solution for that in place. Final tip is to get a buddy, and make sure this is someone who's not your manager, so you can ask them the questions you don't want to ask your manager, or you might feel awkward about asking your manager, which you don't. Let them know, but it's always helpful to have someone who's just an ally on your side that you can ask just those little questions as you're going through things in your first couple of days and couple of weeks. It's possible that your company already has something like this in place. Alternatively, just ask for someone who's been there for a while and can help introduce you to what the company culture is like. Before you go, I've got 3 key questions that I think are important to ask before you get started to make that transition as easy as possible. The first is finding out how your team communicate. So some companies will do lots of Slack messages and Slack channels where you're expected to look at those responses, or emails are really important, but you don't want to be sending people loads and loads of emails if they mainly communicate on Slack. And that can be quite overwhelming to understand. So that's what your buddy is really good for. So understanding how the team communicate. The second is, when do I log on and off for the day? So I've heard many examples of people just being online at 10 a.m. and not having heard anything because someone's forgotten that they had to have an introduction call. So find out for your first day, when do I log on? Do I need to let anyone know when I'm logging off? In most cases you won't, but it's always good to ask. And the final tip for getting to know people is asking for an organization chart. So being able to know who is part of which team and what role they do effectively in their names. And hopefully you can get a photo of them as well, just to make that easier for you to remember, so you don't have to stalk all of them on LinkedIn every time you're on a call. Again, we have an onboarding tool called Rippling that we use that's super helpful for that. I'll leave the link down below that you might recommend. Of course, it's going to be a more expensive solution, but I'm sure someone from the company can put that together for you. So there you have it, my tips for starting a new job remotely. Take it easy. It's going to be a little bit challenging, but after that, you'll find that a remote job can be just as fulfilling, with really great relationships at work, and can be much more efficient with the work that you do. So best of luck with starting out your job. If you enjoyed this video, my name's Eva Evangelou. I'm a career coach and customer success director, and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe and hit the bell for new career videos every Friday. Thanks for watching.